Mark Jackolski, is that how you say your last name? Jackolski?
Yeah, you got it right.
Nice. Yes. Well, Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's been I met you at, I think I met you for the first time. What was that? CS5? Was that correct?
Hmm.
CS5
Yep.
East. But I know that we've been talking. Guys on my team have been talking to you guys and Shellproof and stuff like that. But yeah, super happy to have you on, and um, please let us hear about you and just a quick background on you and just a brief introduction. We're going to get more nitty gritty into the personal stuff here in a minute, but just tell everybody who you are and what you do, where you work.
Yeah, should I begin with how I got to where I am today, or just give you a quick 2-second what I do?
2 seconds, and then I'm going to dive in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Shellproof is building cybersecurity programs for defense and aerospace contractors, offering fractional CISO services, and basically helping everyone get to where they need to be to provide evidence and really get to the maturity level that everyone's looking to be at.
Awesome. Yeah. Mark Jackolski, you are the man, the myth, the legend, apparently. Well, yeah. So I wanted to, you know, have a good chance to sit down and talk with you. I know that you are working with a lot of div contractors, right? So now tell me, you guys do MSP work, correct? Like, so it's kind
No,
of like a merger project type
yeah,
relationship.
no. So we don't do any MSP work at all. The only managed service that we really do is vulnerability scanning. But
Okay, that's what I was. Okay.
there's one owner that has mutual ownership between an MSP as well as Shellproof.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That I
yeah,
think that was the part that I got mixed up is you do have ongoing like vulnerability kind of high level VCSO type relationships, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then you also have, correct me if I'm wrong, but like initial upfront, like firm fixed price projects to help people get to where they need to get. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But typically we'll prefer to have a service agreement in place where we can do a lot of the required activities and spread out the cost over a recurring fee, so to speak. But yes, we also have the fixed project approach as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that because I want to see maybe where you fit into a lot of our listeners' lives and see maybe how you can help and things like that. But yeah, let's definitely back up a little bit since you're one of the faces that some might see when they engage Shellproof, right? I'd love for them to get to know you a little bit. So, Mark, could you kind of take us back to as early as you want to go? I'm always I tell everybody I'm really like a huge fan of making this more personable. So,
Yeah.
if you want to start, childhood, early years, where you grew up, how you grew up, what made you the man that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I am usually the person that'll just give you like a really quick sentence and then just stop. But I'll try and give you a little bit more than that.
Yeah, yeah. Come out of your
So
shell, Mr.
yeah, yeah.
Shellproof.
Nice. I see what you did there.
I
Yeah,
hope
so I
so.
grew up on Long Island, New York, Miller Place, small town. And had a group of friends there for a long time, and went to school also on Long Island, Stony Brook University. And then on my last semester at Stony Brook University, I studied abroad in Australia alone. I met my wife there.
Wow.
And she's actually from Spain. I thought she was American at the time, but it turns out she was Spanish. I ended up living in Spain for a year. I was teaching English, figuring out a way for us to be together, and then eventually she came over to the U.S. And she's now been here, I think, for 11 years, and now we have a 2-year-old daughter. And I guess from a career standpoint, I was studying information technology at Stony Brook University, and then I worked at an MSP for a bunch of years, probably about 6, 7 years. And then during that time, I was
6, 7.
yeah, something like that.
We
that's what the,
gotta
that,
stop it. We
that's
gotta
what the
stop that.
all right, end. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what the kids are saying.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was different in my time. We were saying all sorts of other stuff. But
yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. So Yeah, so I guess that brings me to during that time I was a help desk engineer. I became a primary IT manager at an engineering firm, and then project manager. And then during that time, there was a lot of work that came up around cybersecurity and project work, and a lot of the projects I was working on, they were not they didn't have a beginning and an end. I just kept working with them, and it turned into basically what I'm doing at Shellproof today is helping people kind of understand the compliance requirements and building cybersecurity programs. So I moved over from the MSP side and became a partner in Shellproof.
Wow. Yeah, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile just to kind of get a mental sketch of like your background, but none of that. Other than it does mention that you were a web editor at Stony Brook, none of that mentioned about the fact that you're studying abroad. Obviously, it's not going to capture that on your LinkedIn profile and stuff like. Wait, so tell me about that. So you were in Australia. Did you see any giant spiders?
I saw all sorts of stuff. I did see some spiders. I saw a ton of kangaroos. Honestly, kangaroos are a lot like squirrels over there. You see more,
Really?
yeah, you see more than you realize. Or maybe so Long Island here, there's a lot of deer, so maybe it's comparable to that. But I would say there's more kangaroo there than there are deer on Long Island. So yeah, um,
What?
and
Oh
just
my
the
goodness.
wildlife there is insane. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories of the type of insects and scorpions and things like that that you might come across over there in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, that one of the craziest things they have is something called irukandji. So,
You're a
hope,
kanji.
yeah, hopefully I get this right. So, irukandji, from my understanding, it's like little jellyfish that you can barely see. They almost look like ice cubes. Um, and when you're swimming in the water, if you're around irukandji, if you get stung, I think it can be life-threatening. So,
Oh
it's
boy.
funny because people think of sharks, they think of uh, all sorts of dangerous animals, but nobody's thinking about irukandji. So
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that place sounds like a death trap. I don't know. I don't know. I've seen like some of those like yeah, the spiders over there. Oh my goodness. I'm not a
I,
spider guy.
I'm an adventure person at heart. So yeah,
Mm.
the fun thing I always like to say is I was wakeboarding in the Brisbane River, where it's I think the most populated place for bull sharks, and they're known to be super aggressive. So I would sometimes be wakeboarding, I'd fall, and then the boat would take off, and I would just be sitting in the water waiting for the boat to come back, and knowing that there supposedly are bull sharks everywhere. So
Oh, ah, ah.
yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So studying abroad, you're in Australia, you're doing your thing, and so you say you met your wife. Where did you meet her as part of the studying abroad like curriculum and stuff like was she in your class and stuff like that?
Yeah, so while I was there, I made a point of going out of my way to try and live with people from other countries. I wanted to kind of basically find a house where there's a bunch of other people traveling abroad from other countries and learn from them and kind of get the experience that way. And ultimately, what I found was I just couldn't avoid Americans. I was always around Americans, and obviously I love Americans, but I just wanted to kind of explore new cultures, things like that. And the funny thing is, the American group that I hung out with, she was a part of that group, and so I just assumed that she was American. And then it turned out that she was from Spain. So
So she didn't have an accent or anything?
not at all. Not even a little bit. Well, maybe a little bit, but
Wow.
barely any. Yeah.
Wow. So okay, so you guys did you get married in Australia?
No, we got married in Spain. We
Okay.
spent like I actually leading up to the wedding, I sort of had like a bachelor party. Um,
Okay,
kind of
here we
like
go.
kind of like kind of kind of like kind of like the hangover, honestly. so
Oh boy.
so me and my friends went to Portugal, Amsterdam, and then eventually Spain leading up to the wedding. So after all this traveling, we kind of finished it off with an awesome party, which was the wedding. So yeah, it was a good time, great, a lot of good memories.
Sounds pretty good. And so then you said you were in Spain living with your wife in Spain and you said you were teaching English. Was that like part of like a schooling program or was that like online? What was that like?
Yeah, so we were apart for about a year, and I knew that I wanted to get over to Spain to live there and be with her. And I was trying to figure out what my options were, and I went back to Stony Brook and I said, "Hey, do you guys have any sort of program that I can get involved in where I can continue my education over there?" And they had a graduate degree in 1 year for bilingual education. So I went over there and I studied as well as I taught English, and um, I was basically getting paid by teaching English at a school, um, and then studying on the weekends, and then even during like lunch, I would do bilingual like learning. So I would kind of do an exchange with other people that are from there. So it was a bit of a hustle.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
I
a
was,
hustle. That sounds
yeah, it
like a
was a
lot of
hustle.
work.
Yeah, and I would get around with a little penny board, and I would go down some crazy hills, and it's amazing that I've
A
never
what?
actually.
You
You know what a penny board is?
no.
So it's like a skateboard, but it's the size of like your foot. So it's easy to carry around. So I was like using that to get around and going through traffic on that, and it was just a crazy time, honestly.
I gotta look this up. What is it? How do you spell it? Penny?
Penny like
Like
Abraham
a
Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln penny. Okay.
Yeah,
Penny board. Oh,
you've probably seen it.
like it looks like a longboard, like the shape of a longboard, but it's mini.
It's super short. Yeah, it's like the shape of a longboard, but it's super short.
Interesting. So you were just like you were just vibing in Spain, dude.
I was
You
vibing
were
is
just
a
vibing in
good way to
Spain.
put it. That's a good way to put it. But it was really a hustle, to be honest.
Yeah,
It
that
was a
sounds
lot of
like
fun.
a lot of work. I mean, I struggled learning Spanish and stuff just like the little bit that I learned in high school. So like imagine like full on bilingual teaching it English to people, so you have to communicate them the accuracy of what you're saying, but you have to know enough Spanish. Yeah, wow. What was your wife doing at this time?
She was in school. She was
Yeah.
finishing up her degree. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's awesome. What's her degree in, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah. She was originally she was studying psychology, and she wanted to get into traumatic brain injury.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and and she kind of took a somewhat of a similar path as me in that she ended up doing project management at hospitals and then fell into compliance. So now she's in conflict of interest at a big hospital dealing with compliance. So yeah,
Uh-oh.
it's funny stuff.
That's awesome. You guys get in debates about stuff? Does she deal with CMMC at all?
She does
Probably
not.
not.
She does not know, but I definitely talked to her about it. The biggest crossover that we talked about is um,
HIPAA
a
security rule.
no, actually, believe it or not, the Chips and Science Act. So that was something that came up in her work. It's oh man, I don't want to get this wrong, but basically, my understanding is it's a way to provide funding for manufacturing of computer chips in the U.S. A way of incentivizing people to manufacture, and it's for national security. So
Right,
it's
right.
interesting.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
have an alternative to just Taiwan, I guess maybe.
exactly. Yeah,
Wow. That's cool. That's cool. So you guys have some common interest when it comes to your career. That's pretty neat.
yeah. There's definitely some common threads for sure.
Tell her to come over to the dark side of CMMC.
She'll never. She would
She'll
never.
never do it. She'll
she
never.
hear she she hears me talk about it too much to want to
Yeah.
do it.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so you're in Spain and you're coming over here, and I see that you worked at Proactive Technology Group. That was an MS. That was the MSP you mentioned, right?
Yep.
For 5 or
Yep.
6 years. What was your time there like?
It was good. I grew quickly. I mean, I was always looking for the next avenue to develop in my career and kind of figure out like what is that next thing. So I was always pushing to kind of do that thing that kind of put me outside my comfort zone. So any opportunity where something came up where maybe you had to be the on-site tech or be a full-time IT manager at a firm or get involved in some big project or migration, I was always kind of the one raising my hand and trying to be that involved in that. So
Yeah, did you? I mean, I know you had mentioned part of that process of working there. you were starting to see more and more like security related projects. Was compliance part of your wheelhouse while you were there too, like at some point?
Um, as soon as I became a project manager, it became part of my wheelhouse because there were a lot of opportunities that came through and ended up being projects related to compliance and security. And when the CMMC interim rule came out, everyone wanted to get their SBRS score and do an assessment. So
Right.
that was kind of the first real like
Yeah.
serious
Everybody's doing
approach.
gap
Yeah,
assessments.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So you guys started out with your like the DODAM base gap assessments with clients and giving them a nice templated, SBRS score and helping them build a like an initial high level SSP before we had all the nuances that CMMC ultimately birds later on.
Yeah, yeah, we did, but to be completely honest, I feel like NIST 800 171A created a lot more clarity in like how things should actually be assessed and what things should actually look like for how you're testing the controls. So the difference and the evolution of like what that was then till now is in my experience has been completely different given the way the framework has kind of shaped. So
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a period of time where a lot of people were just doing high level 800 171 yes or no, right?
right.
But then under the interim rule with 7019 and the DODAM, that's where we were explicitly stating, and I think a lot of people missed on this, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people didn't realize this until much later, just because the knowledge base that there is now of resources for learning this
100%.
stuff was much more limited. But people weren't even aware of the DODAM for a period of time where it's explicitly there in DFAR 7019, but who's reading the 7019 clause in their contract? So when
Hmm.
they finally do see the 7019 and it says you have to do it in accordance with 800 alpha, and you have to, there's the test and examine and all that stuff. When you
Right.
start to read 800 alpha, then people were like, "Oh crap!" But I didn't realize there was all these objectives, and I didn't realize. You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
yeah, we saw the same thing. We even for a period of time, were directly working with companies that was all all that was available to them, or that's
Hmm.
all that was known. So yeah, we saw it too. We saw it too, and it's once everybody had that knowledge sharing basis, people were being more forthcoming. The guys like Jacob Horn were starting to spit up a lot of content, and there's a lot of learning going on out there. And that's when I think SPRS scores started to be a little bit more accurate. I
Right.
still think for a good chunk, for it was a while. It was a while before people weren't just slapping 110 in SPRS and calling it a day. Which we still have companies coming to us every once in a while saying, "Hey, 4 years ago we slapped a 110. We didn't know that we
Right.
were doing something wrong. We didn't know that there were these objectives. Um, we want to make it right." You know what I mean?
Right. And I think the guidance that came out, and I don't remember when the CMMC certified professional like certification came out, but I think I did that in 2021. I don't know, my timelines are going to line up correctly. I did that in 2021, I believe, and then CMMC 2.0 came out, and I couldn't even take the test until they redid all the training.
Yeah.
But it was, but I guess what I'm saying is some of those resources around the certification and the guidance that came out in the assessment guide, all that stuff really kind of shaped better understanding, I guess, for everyone. But I didn't know that everyone even knew that that stuff was available to them.
Yeah. I think there was a couple of roles that obviously are no longer a thing. Like there was the provisional assessors and provisional instructors and
Hmm.
all that stuff. So yeah, there was definitely an evolution there that, I mean, it's the reason why I'm saying it is it seems to me that it's kind of expected that early on in that project, while information is being disseminated, which has always been a struggle with the federal government and just with industry in general. But it seems to me like early on, there were going to be variances of interpretation and variances of ways assessments are done. And I think that's exactly what happened is you have some people taking totally different interpretation of requirements
Yeah.
and totally different understandings of how assessments were required to be performed, where you do have a little bit of like a scatter map of people all over the place and how things were done. But I think we're at the point now where there's enough information. I mean, we still see companies that do still struggle with figuring out what they have to do and whatnot. But we're at the point now where there's so much information readily available. I mean, even from the DoD themselves,
Hmm.
that the chances or the likelihood of being able to make an informed decision, at least on how to do an assessment, I'm much more confident in where industry is now than it was even 3 years ago. So
Totally.
yeah,
And,
100%.
and I also feel like there were so many people saying things with such conviction and saying that
Oh my goodness,
things
yeah.
are a certain way, and you see it on the opposite sides of the spectrum, and it only created confusion. And it is nice to see even the DoD coming out with a much better page where all the resources are really just right there on
Yeah,
one
the
page.
CIO
Because
resources. Yep.
yeah, where in the past I felt like it was in a couple different places and it wasn't entirely clear, but they're definitely doing a lot that is making things much easier for everyone.
Yeah, the
So
holdup is you still have to read it to know
yeah,
what the requirements actually are. And
that
we
is true.
again we still are like, yeah, I've seen that document. I just haven't had a chance to look through it. And it's like, well, that's the reason why we're having this debate right now,
Right.
because you haven't taken a peek at that. But yeah, no, I think we're in a much better position. I give great props to other people in the industry that have devoted their time to trying to just be a public source of knowledge and help people move forward. I really do think that has been one of the key factors in like industry people, private people.
Right.
In addition to what the DoD has done with like the resources page that you mentioned and stuff like that, but like industry people that have, at with no guarantee that they would recur or incur any business opportunities from it. I mean, obviously that's part of it. Marketing is part of it, but like sharing knowledge, like what we're doing right now has been, there's no guarantee of a business opportunity being won through this, but
Right.
you know, we all agree that when, the rising tide raises all boats, and that's what we're trying to help is with that rising tide. And I think a lot of people in the industry have been such a blessing to the DoD and the DIB, and got us to the point where, yeah, I am much more confident that people are at least aware of what the baseline fundamental requirements for the CMMC program are, or at least know how to get the answers. So yeah,
Right.
100%.
But what amazes me is the CUI Discord, the amount of people that are there all day long answering
Yeah,
questions. It cracks
those
me up
guys.
too, but yeah.
Those guys, I told you when we were meeting to get ready for the podcast that, in IntelliGRC, we're like heads down doing very similar stuff to what y'all are doing. We have consulting engagements and projects where we're teaching MSPs and OSCs on what they need to do. We'll help them. We'll actually support the writing of of their SSP and things like that. And we'll help them do the work. And
Right.
then on the other side of that, we're actually sitting in on a lot of their assessments, representing them, because we're trying to get as much information to improve the IntelliGRC app as part of this. And
Hmm.
I don't have time to be on that GUI Discord, the
Right.
GUI Discord all the time. But yeah, it blows my mind. I know that those guys are busy too. So you can see that they just have a passion for helping people understand, and it's also super fun to debate. Like a lot of these
Definitely.
people are super opinionated, a lot of these people are, but they're passionate, and so it's fun to get in there and tease out scenarios and debate it out. And but it's just really cool to see how many people are involved, and that Discord is just blown up. Like,
Totally. And the memes themselves is enough
oh, it's
reason to
glorious.
stick around. It's so funny.
It's glorious.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were at Proactive doing project management. You were starting to get your hands dirty on compliance stuff. When you were the project manager over there, were you actually doing the work, the hands-on technical documentation, gap assessment work yourself in tandem with managing the projects?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of times I was. So when it came to a compliance project, I would typically just do the assessment, and at times I would just jump in and help with some of the technical implementations, depending on what it is, because I was so familiar with what we're documenting.
Hmm.
Um, but as things evolved, we all realized that there's a special skill to this that's not every MSP and not every technician can do. It's better to kind of have somebody oversee the process and have the cogs of the wheel moving behind it. So yeah, every now and then I would do technical things, but mostly it was just the assessments for the compliance work.
Got it. Did you guys help with remediation too?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that seemed to be the going, and still is like the going opportunity for service providers, whether it's an ongoing managed service provider type relationship or like you guys, those consulting companies who will come in and like do a gap assessment and then sell remediation work because, well, you guys know what the problem is
Right.
based on what you've assessed, and maybe you're not super familiar with the system itself and the scope and all the intricacies and configurations and stuff like that, but at least you have a guiding hand, a working knowledge of the framework requirements themselves, but also you have enough knowledge to be intimate with how you can implement it in a customer's environment, or at least work with the people who will do the hands-on technical work. So that that seems to be like the going way. And so if companies are out there listening that, you're looking for opportunities for how you can support this industry, I would say talk to Mark. He's probably got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's really I guess, a blessing and a curse that I have such a technical background because, we're guiding the process, but it will also eat at me because I'm like, oh, I could just do this. I know exactly how to do this, but I think it's better that we're, walking people through the process.
100%.
That
100%.
urge is always there.
We had a couple projects early on when we really started a services department here in Intelli, where we would actually get laptops from the client to do work.
Oh, wow.
And dude, they were nightmare projects. Like obviously we're talking about the procedural authorization concerns where, we're now users in their scope. The
Right.
devices are in their, in scope, extra things that they have to make sure that they're applying, ensure that we were using them as opportunities for test equipment and things like that. But just the due diligence, routine compliance stuff with extra users that weren't going to stick around was always something that gnawed at us. So we did end up, just to what you're saying, we did end up deciding to go strictly consulting. We'll consult on the technical stuff, but you have to
Right.
be the one doing the key jamming. Yeah.
Right. It's funny. I was doing a mock assessment recently, and I'm watching someone poke around in Intune for a setting, and it's taking a while. I'm like, just click on the configuration manager. Just click here. Just click here. It's that type of thing. And I'm like, really, you should know where this stuff is, and you should be able to show me because you're managing the system. But
Right.
um, these things happen.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so the project management was that first kind of taste, it sounds like, of all that wonderful juicy compliance work, right? And then so now you're at Shellproof. You came from proactive to Shellproof. What was the driving factor of, if you don't mind me asking, you moving over to Shellproof?
An opportunity to build something, really, really build something. It's really Shellproof has been around since 2016, but there was really nobody kind of running the business. So the opportunity of coming on as a partner and having equity and kind of building the whole company out, and creating the brand, so to speak, has been a lot of fun. Understanding the psychographics of some of the buyers we're talking to, and just the overall problem that's going on locally, even for manufacturers, I find super interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and learning about those businesses and all the different parts and pieces and the supply chain that make up the bigger, um, military vehicles and things like that is really just fascinating. So that's really how it kind of shaped.
Yeah, that's really neat. So when you came to Shellproof, did you come in directly as director of risk and compliance? Like that was they needed somebody to head up this entire wing of the company, and they didn't have anybody. Is that kind of how that worked?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Wow.
So I was kind of the one to just take over there.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Shellproof, like as a company. I know you mentioned in the intro a little bit of what they do, but what is a day to day common project type work with Shellproof looked and your relationship with customers?
Day to day, it's regular updates to SSPs, policy writing, regular monthly meetings to kind of go over technical reviews and understanding like some of the monitoring activities and really forming and shaping the program. So we have regular activities that we'll perform, such as tabletop exercises,
Hmm.
vulnerability scanning, obviously CMMC assessments, risk assessments, change management, and holding change management meetings, um, and
Nice.
and really like kind of being an integral piece in the process without actually turning the buttons of changing anything in the environment. Um,
So you
so
guys, sorry to cut you off. So you
yeah,
guys essentially, there's a couple of terms that like hot button terms that get thrown out there, buzzwords, if you will. But so you guys would be for your ongoing relationship with customers doing those change advisory board, change control board, whatever you're calling them, type meetings. You guys are kind of acting as like a managed security service provider, fractional
yes,
CISO type. Okay. Okay. So
yes.
why is that for the listener? Why is that an important offering? Like, why might a company want to use you?
I think a big reason why it's important is what I've seen in the industry oftentimes is there'll be consultants that come in, they do an assessment, they provide maybe some guidance on whether something's met or not. They get this report, it sits on a shelf, and then they move on with their day and they never do anything with it. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to a company, probably sometime around the interim rule, where they got an assessment done. They went to their local MEP center. They got some budget to kind of take on part of the cost. They did it. They got this big stack of papers. They filed it away and then never looked at it again. So you know, I guess what's somewhat unique about what we do is we'll do the assessment, we'll create the roadmap, and then we'll be there along the way to make sure the things are done and we're building the evidence and we're kind of shaping the regular activities need to happen and essentially training people to understand what it's really going to take. Because I think a lot of times what happens is um, it takes a while before somebody actually goes, oh, I have to do, there's a lot that needs to be done here. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So we're here to kind of help them understand that and be part of that process.
So you guys are essentially fulfilling for many companies. You're filling in a void that they might not have the internal funding or knowledge or people to fill. You're filling that CISO security, compliance team void that maybe a small mom and pop manufacturer or medium
Right.
sized business manufacturer or whoever might not, aerospace might not have the funding or the capabilities or the know-how to put together themselves. So they turn to Mark at Shellproof and they depend on you for that. Yeah.
Right. They might be fully capable of all IT functions in their business and they're managing things, but they don't understand what it really takes and what kind of recurring activities need to happen to make sure it's maintained and you're within compliance.
Mm.
Um, and so, when we create our roadmap and when we create our projects, as we're kind of completing them, we're asking for the evidence to be submitted or uploaded or provided on a continual basis, so we can ensure that we have everything we need come go time, so to speak. So,
That's awesome. So two questions about that. So one, for your for these services that you guys are providing, these ongoing services, um, your CRM is probably pretty straightforward, I would assume. We support for 3.4.3, the change management approval process. We'll facilitate those meetings. We'll provide our
yeah,
security impact for 3.4.4,
yeah,
and then leadership makes the decision and things like that. So you're pretty much, you have a select group of security requirements from 800.171 that you're pretty clearly able to articulate that you support, I would assume.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The change management one, we have regular monthly reports where we, can provide the actual templated language for the security impact analysis and the actual change activities that need to be discussed and approved. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward for the things that we're helping provide. Yes.
Yeah. So the other question I had is, for these companies that are going with you guys, it sounds to me that that's a pretty good indication that this really isn't too much of a problem. But I'm curious, how often are you guys seeing struggles with either like IT department buy-in or leadership buy-in to your all suggestions and approaches and procedures, things like that, that you guys are essentially coming in and, implementing 800.171, as you know, is a culture shifting
100%.
thing. It
100%.
changes the way it's no longer merely convenience hot up here, security down here, but it's much more balancing those things out. So like, what's your experience? Even, I mean, with them coming to you, that's a sign that they're trying to do something about it. But what is your experience with that struggle?
I think I think really what happens is there's typically not an emphasis on this being a priority. There's other things
Mm.
they're thinking about day to day, and this just kind of is put on a shelf still. So we try to structure our meetings where we have different audiences for different types of meetings. So we're meeting with executive leadership on a quarterly basis, maybe IT on these monthly meetings, and we're trying to get everyone kind of bought into what we're trying to work on. And I like to say eventually a light bulb goes off, but honestly, I feel like sometimes it's multiple light bulbs at different times that go off. Uh,
Nice.
so, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely a cultural shift. It's no longer, you just make the change and see what happens, right? So it is definitely a lot of training, is a lot of talking through kind of what it's going to take so that eventually they can start to really make it happen.
Yeah. Would you say that, I know CMMC is the hot topic right now? That's the priority, and we'll talk about CMMC probably for the next 10 years, because we're going to be talking about rulemaking here soon for Rev 3 and
Mhm.
whenever that happens, right? So, but I'm curious, is CMMC the only priority that you guys are seeing at Shelfproof, or are you guys helping with other frameworks like HIPAA or SOC 2, things like that?
At the moment, CMMC is our primary focus and driver.
Yeah.
I've put so much into it, and I believe in the overall mission.
Yeah.
So that's really our focus. But that's not to say if there was any other compliance requirement, we wouldn't help in that. We have
Yeah.
some clients with HIPAA requirements, but yeah, most of our focus has been CMMC. But I would imagine the future evolution being around AI and who knows, maybe some sort of robotics type thing as these things grow. I don't know.
Yeah. I was, I was interested to kind of start diving into the AIRMF stuff that NIST has put out.
Yep.
NIST CSF, my brain, because of how used I am to 800.171 and the CMMC assessment guide and just the structure of that framework.
Right.
CSF based control sets for things like AI RMF, like, I get it, but I feel like it's so much less certain, and I think that's probably the point. Is it's not currently mandated, right? It's more of
Right.
it is a guidelines and frameworks, right? So, but it is interesting to see, on one hand, the current administration is really pouring into AI development and things like that. We want to be the winners, right? But on the other hand, it does also look like NIST is taking seriously like the risks related to it. Um, I don't know if have you seen AI RMF 1.0 yet? Have you looked
I
at it at
have
all?
no, honestly, I haven't dove into it too much, but
It's
the one thing that
interesting.
Okay, I'm definitely. I plan to take a look at it. I also want to do probably a certification 2026 for specifically AI. Um,
Mm.
but I did hear about NIST CSF having now a certification. You can go to a third-party organization to have a NIST CSF certification, which I thought was very interesting because
You
for the
mean like an
longest time,
organization certification, or you mean like a individual getting
o-
certified and assessing it or
i-
learning
an
about it?
org an organization can get certified in NIST CSF.
Really?
Um, that's what I've heard, and I always said, when people are deciding between ISO 27001 or NIST CSF, I would always say, ISO has that certification where NIST CSF doesn't. But I
That's not the
I did
case anymore,
hear
it sounds like.
that's what I've. Hopefully, it's not fake news. We'll see. Um,
So, let me see here. Looks like there are, yeah, some things that are like high level third party validations. I don't know if certifications is the right term, like formal certifications. Oh, I get maybe. I don't know. There's a couple websites out there advertising CSF compliance certification services. So maybe that's news to
yeah,
me.
I mean, I did I did see some posts on LinkedIn about it, but I haven't dove super deep into it.
Yeah, I haven't either. I mean, that's one of the things we're starting to think about now, especially now that with the final rule and phase roll off kicking out is, we've got CMMC isn't the only thing in our world, and
Right.
the IntelliGRC app has supported ISO 27001, um, the Annex A controls, and we've got some pre-tailored objective based control sets for the common criteria from SOC 2, and we've got the HIPAA security rules, so the technical requirements from the HIPAA security rule. Like we've got those in there, we've supported them, but everybody's main focus has been CMMC for like the last 5 years. So it's been, or 3 years more, I think is more accurate that it's actually been the focus. But yeah, it's been interesting to think about. Okay, what happens now? If everybody's getting certified for CMMC, I mean, we've seen IDIQ um, requirements from the contracting side, where they've had CMMC on the docket, ready to go, ready to launch into the IDIQ as the prerequisite for being part of that IDIQ, that vehicle. But we've also seen like ISO 27001 being an expectation for that vehicle. So I'm wondering,
Hmm.
we've got the FAR CUI rule, which is whenever or whatever that turns out to be. It's in proposed rule right now, but we've not gotten we've not spent much time thinking about the hereafter. And I'm wondering what that's going to look like for DIB contractors or just people who are going to have more stringent requirements in their contracts for things other than CMMC that are still cybersecurity compliance relevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think certification is really the way to go. It has to be that way because
I
you can
agree.
see just how much movement there was behind NIST 800 171 and the DFARS requirement because of CMMC, and it really created a major shift in the industry that needs to happen in other areas. Probably HIPAA would be the right another good place to focus.
Right, because
So
HIPAA doesn't have a certification; they have
yeah,
an audit if something were to happen, like an incident or
right.
something, right? So, I mean, that's a good point. I think we'll have to see with the FAR CUI rule if the rest of the federal government will follow suit with a certification approach. I think that is one of the current unknowns is this going to be a replay of 2016, 2017 with DVAR 7012, and then leading up to the interim rule where nobody was actually doing what they say they were doing? Is this going to be another, or are they going to early on learn from the DoD and from the DIB in that situation? I mean, we got to think the requirements for implementing 80171 Rev 3 for the entirety of the federal contracting base, the third party contractor base. I mean, we're talking about yet another huge swaths of companies on top of just the DIB alone that are
Well,
going to have significant requirements that nobody. It's going to be again. It's going to be a replay if there's
yeah.
no weight to it. It's going to be a replay of 2016, 2017, leading up to 2020.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's going to be interesting about Rev 3 is the third-party risk management flow down and some of that I feel like, some companies aren't even really thinking about yet.
Supply chain and all that stuff.
Yeah, supply chain, that sort of thing. But yeah.
I mean, it could very well be the case. This is me getting on my soapbox here because I wrote a blog a couple weeks ago about essentially about the debate that's going on or had been going on between whether phase 1 was going to have a lot more level 2 certification assessment requirements show up early
Mm-hmm.
at the DoD's discretion than waiting till phase 2, because at least on paper, phase 1 is supposed to be primarily about self-assessments, level 1 and level 2 self-assessments, which are very few level 2 self-assessments, and mostly, the CMMC level 1 self-assessments. But it also is very clear that the DoD, at their discretion, can include certification requirements early. So, I'm thinking, the difference between self-assessment eligibility and certification assessment eligibility under the DoD's CMMC program is all predicated on the sensitivity of the data, right? The category of CUI that it is.
Right.
So we have the memo, we have the class memo for if you have this type of CUI in this category on NARA's website, minimum is certified. Whereas if you're outside of this organizational index for the defense type data, then self-assessment is the minimum level. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So, which was a really good memo for them to release. But I'm wondering, with what we're talking about, the FAR, I'm wondering if maybe the reason why we could end up with a certification-less approach is because the type of data that NASA holds, or the type of data that the Department of Energy might hold, is deemed to be not nearly as significant as defense, like critical defense NARA CUI categories. And so maybe we will end up with a self-assessment program. I don't know. It's interesting to me to think about. I mean, I like your point that is it really going to get done if it's all self-assessments?
I think not.
I think that evidence,
yeah.
the evidence
Yeah,
has shown
evidence
it's
is, yeah, for sure.
not. Which, to be honest, I think, and I want your thoughts on this. I think the same is going to be true about level 2 self-assessments.
Totally. But I often think about level 2 self-assessments, like if at least from the customers we deal with, if you have one contract that's going to require a level 2 self-assessment, you have other contracts. More than likely, the others are not going to have it. The others are going to require certification. Therefore, it's just a false sense of, what's going to
Security,
come.
yeah.
Yeah.
I the one pushback that I would have to that idea is, we have worked with clients that, like, we worked with one of the largest CPA firms in the DoD, in the DIB.
Mm-hmm.
All of their contracts are financial data. They don't have control technical information or other
Right.
nuclear data, right? Their whole existence is doing financial audits within defense contracting situations where they're validating financial records. They, in my opinion, could have been very eligible and likely, and it would not have been unwise for them to prepare for a level 2 self-assessment. But you're right. Just because there are scenarios like that where, you've got CPA firms or whatever doing these financial audits for the government, it is totally not the norm, right? For them to be relegated to to just those. If you're working on a DoD contract, that's why the DoD estimates in the public inspection version of the final rule when it came out, 32 CFR final rule when it came out. That's why the number of level 2 self-assessments are so low. It's like 500 companies, maybe. I think 517 or something like that. So granted, I can't remember the exact number. I'd have to pull it up, but it's very low. So granted, I see where you're coming from, and I think that's wise to at least, like, for the listener, consider, if you think that this one contract that maybe is even one of your primary contracts that looks like it's not going to have data that's going to require the certification, right? Because of the category of CUI that it is. Don't just assume that your other contracts are going to give you that same leisure.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. But to be honest, we don't deal with a lot of companies like that, but makes sense given like their industry that would be the case.
Right. That's right. You're dealing with manufacturers, right?
Primarily, and distributors, but yeah.
Aerospace, yeah. Yeah. So what have you been able to, now that the 48 CFR is final, once the 32 CFR was final, we saw people immediately start getting certified pretty much in the following January. We pretty much started seeing people get certified once the effective date was in place. So have you guys had customers that have gone through the assessment yet?
No, actually we have a mixed bag. We have some that say we don't see any rush to do it. We're there. We don't see any need to like go out and get the certification right now and spend that money, which is odd to me. But mostly because their customers aren't requiring the certification; they're just asking for the self-assessment. Even though I've explained that it would really make a lot of sense to start talking and
right.
getting comfortable with the C3 Pro you're going to work with, and understanding budget, timeline, all that stuff, kind of given that,
and getting on the calendar.
Availability,
availability
is limited. And if you have a preference for who you want to work with, you want to figure that out ahead of time. So, and then there's others where it's like Q1 next year, Q2 next year. So we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So like Q1 2026 is
the
timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whenever you have that first assessment, let me know how it goes, because it's fun. It's stressful. Depending on the assessor that you go with, it is very insightful. Like, you get to see it. We'd like to say that CMMC is pretty standardized. We'd like to assume that is just what's happening. But from our experience, it's not. Interpretations of requirements, and I think this is one of the main reasons why the Cyber AB is setting up those advisory boards, because we're just seeing a plethora of what's acceptable evidence. We're seeing a plethora of what's acceptable when it comes to the procedural administrative controls over technical controls. Like,
right.
I'm thinking of. I can think of a handful of controls that it's not super easy to implement technically. So, like, if you're dealing with, sure you see this all the time. You're dealing with a client that uses Microsoft 365 Enter ID in a GCC or GCCI tenant, setting up like future proofing for the Rev3 ODPs for password complexity. That is not happening in a straightforward way with Enter ID, like their basic password policies. It's like, what is it? Minimum 8 characters.
8, yeah.
And they're hoping everybody just goes passwordless, right? Like, and I've seen things from, I think Ryan Bonner posted something which was really good. And there was some other talk about how DIPCAC and others are just pretty much straightforward accepting passwordless authentication and essentially letting you apply the password complexity in a way that users will never interact with, right? So, like, sure. But my point is, like, some of these things, procedures, for example, with like identifier reuse for, I think it's 346, some of those requirements where it's like, there's no setting here to say,
right. to
remember
show.
this user ID for this period of time. So either I'm going to procedurally require my administrators to disable the account so the account just exists and the
And
ID
never
can't be
delete.
reused, never
Yep.
delete them, or at least set up like a calendar review or something like that where you're deleting ones that have at least met that threshold that's defined for alpha in that requirement 356. You see what I'm saying? Like a lot of these
Totally.
ones are just straight up, I have a documented procedure or checklist, or even just a policy statement that says you're not allowed to do this. Some assessors are bada bing, bada boom. That's fine. As long as it's in your SSP and I see it on a document or whatever your SSP says, I'm moving on. Others are like, how do you know that your users are, your administrators or your technicians are actually doing that? So
Right.
it's just interesting. You're going to see that, Mark, and it's really cool. And it's cool to, I love debate. So like, I love to be able to push back and have like an
Oh,
intelligent
absolutely.
conversation. But yeah, you're going to see that.
I'm sure. I'm sure I will. And honestly, the one thing that I think is going to be interesting is sufficiency. So, like, who's measuring sufficient? Like, how much is enough, right?
Yeah.
So, you always want to provide as much as you possibly can, but what is enough? In some cases, it depends on the control. I mean, there's some that are
Yeah.
way more straightforward, where you can just show password complexity for all your CUI asset systems, and then there's others where it's a little bit more uh, loose, so to speak. I don't know.
No, just speaking straight up from experience. And honestly, I'm not knocking on anyone. I get it that the cap doesn't provide explicit granular instructions on every single one of these scenarios. So I get it. And I also know that the industry is laxing up from what I've seen from an assessor standpoint. Not to say people are like just passing obviously failed
Right.
requirements, but when it comes to the actual validation part of it, I am seeing, when it comes to your point about sufficiency, I am seeing people, assessors, pretty much focus on like the core infrastructure only. So, like for example, to give you an example, you're dealing with a Microsoft 365 GCC environment. Entra ID is the only identity provider. It's all cloud only. People are just logging in
Hmm.
with their laptops, and then they've got the facility office, VLAN off printer, and they have an Azure site to site with a firewall blocking off that printer and like one of your manufacturer router machines, whatever. Right, just give some complexity to the environment. A lot of the time, just to be totally blunt, a lot of the time when it comes to um, certain technical requirements, they're really focusing on what they can most easily get their hands on, which is like the intra settings, the conditional access policies, the Intune configuration profile. Um,
Makes sense. I mean, if
yeah,
you can easily demonstrate it without too much hassle, let's focus on that and make sure that's right. So it totally makes sense, and that's
right.
yeah,
But my point is that there are other things that you know they probably should be considering,
yeah.
um, at least glancing over, that oftentimes never get brought up. I know that the CMMC scoping guide says that, say, for example, security protection assets, the obligation is the same essentially as CUI assets, with obviously the CUI specifics trimmed down, right? You're not going to
Hmm.
implement FIPS validated cryptography on security protection data or something like that. But you still have to have access control. You still need a log. You need to get alerts.
Right.
You need to consider how 800.171 applies to those security protection assets too. And so I know that the CMC scoping guide says that the assessor's obligations is to simply validate the requirements that are relevant to the capabilities they provide. Sometimes in my experience, sometimes I've even seen those get sidestepped. Not every
Hmm.
time, but I've seen them get sidestepped because, one, I think assessors are trying to move on a timeline. They're trying to get through this. They're trying to focus. So when you give them your body of evidence that is prioritizing your CUI assets, and maybe here and there, demonstrating a log or something like that from the SIM or something like that. Sometimes it's just my experience that it seems like some things that should be getting at least glanced over are not. So that's just my experience.
Yeah, I'm curious what I'm curious if you have a particular example. But before you answer that, oftentimes when I think about like multi-factor authentication, obviously we're thinking about multi-factor authentication for a CUI asset,
Mm-hmm.
or anywhere that you have access to CUI. But are you enforcing MFA on your SIM? Are you enforcing MFA for your security tools?
Right.
Like that's interesting, that those things aren't tested, but it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But
Yeah, it makes sense from a bandwidth and a
right,
time constraint perspective. I do agree with that. We could go into 8 million rabbit trails, but that is part of the point. Um,
right,
if the requirement is I am here to certify that you as a company are protecting the system as defined by the CMMC scoping guide, right? So all those assets that are in your boundary in accordance with 800.171, which is the requirement. The obligation on the OSC OSA is to implement those requirements where applicable. I mean, the only exception really is specialized assets, and even then, there is a mitigatory type approach to them. But anyway, that being set aside, yeah, no, it is interesting. I'll give you an example. So we deal with a lot of MSPs going through their certifications.
hmm
Um, and we have had several of them go through an actual full formal certification. They're not just prepping to be eligible and not screw their customers during their customers' assessments, which is a minimalist approach that an MSP can take, right? They have their CRM and they're ready to
right,
show up and answer questions. They don't have to have an SSP technically. They don't have to
right,
have all these other documents. We encourage all of that. For them to have all those things and actually go get certified, but they don't have to. But for the ones that we are taking through this certification process, it's often been the case, and I'm just kind of speaking bluntly here, it's often been the case that the tools that are used by the MSP to provide their services, like an RMM tool or the vulnerability scanner, things like that, the interface for connecting to them or the system component themselves are totally sidestepped.
gotcha. That
And
makes a
it's
lot of
like
sense.
so they have Entra ID or Active Directory, ADFS or single sign-on from Entra ID into these tools, or sometimes not even that, not even single sign-on or federation. They just have individual accounts in those tools. But what gets prioritized is that core infrastructure, like the Active Directory, group policies, the workstations that they're logging in from, things like that. So
Right.
it's one of those things that, again, if I was the assessor, I'd probably want to dig a little bit more. But I also get it. I've not been the assessor. I'm not the one that's dealing with time constraints. I'm not the one who on certain documentation, I won't say which documentation, you have to document how long you spent assessing the requirement, which is a funny little tidbit. So anyway, all that to say, to your point, it makes sense, but it is a little bit.
No, yeah. Well, I think the MSP level 2 certification concept is,
It's tough.
yeah, it's complicated because a lot of them are just not handling CUI, in which case, like, what are you bringing into scope, and what are you assessing, and what are you actually measuring? And I think that's kind of part of your point, right? It's like they're sidestepping it because how does that fit into their protection of their systems, and
Yeah,
not so much the services they're providing for their customers. It's
yeah,
something that's been racking my brain forever, and it bothers me as well. So,
yeah. So I'll give you our approach at IntelliGRC. Just I think this is good content for people who are listening. We deal with a lot of MSPs, And if I don't, can I share? I can share in here, can I? All right, I'm going to pull up. Let me pull up a document. I want to show you. I want to show you what I'm referring to as we talk about this, because I think this would be helpful for people to see explicitly, to see where I'm coming from. I recently had a conversation with another C3PO who also, we kind of disagreed on this approach. They were of the opinion that MSPs, they don't have the grounds for getting certified. Like, they can't get certified if they're not
Yeah.
themselves creating an environment that can actually store, process, or transmit CUI, because therefore the basis for CUI is null, and therefore certification is null for them.
That's
I
interesting.
disagree, and
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
gonna explain why. So if we go to the 32 CFR, let me pull this up here. I'm going to do part 170.19. Oh, I forgot the 0 in 170. Here we go. Yes, sir. So 170.19, part 170.19, subpart 19 is the scoping requirements for CMMC in the 32 CFR. Obviously, we have the CMMC scoping guide that kind of condenses all this information into a dedicated document. But here's what I wanted to show. When you can see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the table under here, and I'm bringing this up just to help explicate our approach. So there's a table under here for table 4 of the part 179.19. So this is the table that kind of defines an external service provider. You know this, you've seen this, right? We're all familiar with this. We love this. We were very thankful for this table when the 32 CFR was finalized, because this was not in the original proposed rule, and it made things very confusing and made people think, in addition to some other statements, that MSPs were going to actually have to be fully certified, because they also explicitly said that. But this really helped a lot. So thank you, DoD, for that. Thank you, PMO, for that. All right. So this table defines what an ESP is and all the possible iterations of an ESP's usage in a customer's environment. And the two categories, CSP and non-CSP, they split them into CSPs or non-CSPs that either store, process, or transmit with or without security protection data, CUI. So whether they store, process, and transmit CUI, regardless of whether there's also security protection data in there, because it's the more stringent requirements. It's going to be a CUI asset, right? So it doesn't matter if it also has security protection data, because it's going to have all the most significant requirements employed. Make sense? But
Yes,
then there's security protection data, ESPs. So cloud service providers or non-CSPs, ESPs, MSPs, MSSPs, you guys, right? That they have security protection data but no CUI, and it lays out these as being definitional ESPs, right? That my point in bringing this up is this is the definition of an external service provider. And then it says that these do not meet the definition of an external service provider if they don't have either of those data types, right? So if you're simply doing like staff augmentation, things like that, your company, your infrastructure back home, that's not relevant. As long as, if no customer data, whether it's CUI or SPD, is coming to your environment's out of scope. You, as people that are going to customer sites and doing hands-on technical work, stuff like that, you'll have to comply with their policies and all that jazz. We're agreed on the definition of external service providers. Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the reason why I think that the approach that external service providers that don't have CUI are certainly eligible for certification is because the rule says so. So it gets done defining these categories of external service providers, and then it gives us the requirements for what is the obligation for an actual definitional ESP, which it just got done defining, right? And it says that you have to document the relationship and your use with them in your SSP. Everybody knows this. You have to make sure you have a solid service description. So whether it's your MSA with them or a terms of service, whatever it is that you're using to document the description of the services that they're providing you. And then they have to have a CRM. Good. We all agree with that. There's no debate about this, right? What there is a debate about is the certification thing. And I think it's kind of died down a little bit. Everybody kind of agrees. Now, there's different approaches to what the obligations are for those ESPs if they can get certified. But this is still a little bit of the debate. Note right here that the external service provider that it just got finished defining up here. So that includes external service providers without CS or CUI. So it says, note that the ESP may voluntarily undergo a CMMC certification assessment to reduce the ESP's effort required during the OSA's assessment. The reason why I bring this up is if this was meaning that only CUI handling or CUI eligible handling external service providers, say, for example, an MSP that does local data backups of CUI to their data center, right? To the MSP's data center, right? So if the intention was that only those types of MSPs that were going to actually be handling CUI on their systems were the only ones eligible for this voluntary CMMC assessment, you would think that they would say that here. But all they do is say, note that the ESP can go get a voluntary cert.
And I think it's great that MSPs have the option to do it. But I think that part of the problem though is that they may go and get a certification, but that maybe they don't include any of the way they provide services to their customers in the scope, and it's really not helpful in what they could be doing, which is kind of what's being described here, which is reducing the efforts of having to reinvent the wheel or describe it in their customer's SSP. So they could really just cut all that out and just get a certification, which really is not reducing the effort for their customers. You get what I mean?
Yeah, it's certainly not providing clarity. Now, what's happening in practice from what we've seen is that if an MSP is certified, now again, this is anecdotal experience, but if an MSP is certified, they still have to show up to the assessment. They still have to show up and answer questions and stuff like that. But the CAP does say that the level of effort in demonstration and things like that is going to be reduced. But to your point, the CAP also does say that the assessor still needs to validate whether or not the requirements that the CRM portrays to the customer are still in place and still maintained. But it goes on to say at the end of that sentence in the CAP, which I guess I could bring up here. It goes on to say at the end, here, let me bring it up here. This is good content, man. We're making content. Here's the CAP. I've got loads of bookmarks here. All right. So, I was just talking about this with somebody, so it was already here. But it does say that in the event that an OSC is utilizing a non-CSP ESP that voluntarily attained a level 2 or level 3 certification or certificate of CMMC status, the assessment team should anticipate and accept a lower level of effort on behalf of the ESP during the OSC's assessment. Specifically, if the assessment team confirms the ESP is in possession of a valid CMMC status certificate of CMMC status, it may consider those security requirements under the responsibility of the external service provider to be in a valid state. However, it does go on to say the assessment team shall still ensure that each inherited security requirement from the ESP is still implemented, which to me totally negates the sentence before. But it shall still ensure that each inherited security requirement from the ESP is still implemented and currently being maintained in the state under which it was originally assessed. Get this, and or have the ESP attest to the same.
Yeah.
So this is the part where I think it's still super murky and acknowledged, to your point, we don't have a CAP for external service providers alone. like how
Right.
those assessments actually occur. We don't.
Because because what I'm thinking is like there could be MSPs where maybe they're using all of Microsoft native tools for their environment in which they're getting certified. But then for their customers, maybe they're like, you know what, I'm going to use this tool, this tool,
Sentinel
this tool,
One
this
or
tool. That is
whatever. Yeah,
that is completely not a part of their certification assessment, doesn't describe it at all, and is not reducing the effort at all.
exactly.
So
Yeah. So the approach we're taking is the we do this when we do help an MSP do their scoping, right? We're getting them ready to then engage with the C3PO and all that jazz. Our first step is the same step as an OSC. The only difference, well, it might not actually be a difference. The only, I was going to say the only difference is not CUI, but security protection data, which is the data that matters most of the time for MSPs. So we'll do a data flow we even do a data flow diagram of security protection data because that informs our scoping. And then from there, we talk about, okay, tell me all of the products that you're using to provide services that might store, process, or transmit customer security protection data, like vulnerability scan results and customer credentials that you're using to shared access to their switches or whatever it is. All of that data brings because
that's really smart. I like that a lot. That's
yeah,
really,
and you
yeah.
want to, and this is exactly why we do it. I want to show you this. I'm taking you down a rabbit trail, but this is why we're here.
No, I like it.
Casual,
I like it.
baby,
Let's do
casual.
it.
This right here is the reason why. So this is the CMMC scoping guide that came out after the final rule of the 32 CFR. So this was this some of this context was not here before, but it gives us a section here on security protection data, and it goes on to talk about what security protection data is. It can be or might be created or used by SPAs, right? So we're talking about things like logs that get generated by and or stored in a SIEM, used by the SIEM to do correlation, things like that. But one thing that it goes on to say is that if the SIEM and or associated log data is hosted or maintained by an external service provider, then the portion of the external service provider, assuming, when it says portion here, assuming the parts of their information system, not all of their information system, like their HR system or things like that, but the portion of their system that is used to provide the SIEM service or log storage is part of the OSA's assessment scope. So it's like, Mr. MSP, best MSP ever, you have a on-prem vulnerability scanner that runs remote vulnerability scans over SNMP to our public facing interface. And you also have agents that all report back to this vulnerability scanning server in your data center. That vulnerability scan data center server is by definition part of my scope. It's an asset in my scope definitionally here, according to this. So it's part of the scope. And then SIEM logs, this is where it goes on to say that the SIEM logs, as one of the examples of security protection data that it's giving, it talks about them being available in hot storage, typically co-located with the security protection asset, aka the SIEM service or the SIEM server. But then it goes on to say cold storage of logs for a longer period of time is typically done offline or in cloud storage, meaning elsewhere, not co-located with the SPA, but somewhere else. The method used and the location of the cold storage are also in the OSA's assessment scope. So, and you see how it says SPA. So my point here is that we take the existing language of the CMMC assessment scoping guide in our approach to helping MSPs get ready, where customer data is flowing. And that becomes the predication for what the MSP's scope is that needs to be represented by the MSP's SSP. And in situations where the MSP will never have CUI, still definitionally, they have in-scope assets by virtue of their relationship with customers who do have CUI. And therefore, all of their assets, if they don't have any CUI or CUI assets, it's all just security protection data flowing using to provide those services, to access that environment, to log into customer systems, remote in, whatever it is. All of them by definition are security protection assets. And there's nothing else in scope for them. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, but even if the SIM is in scope, the security protection data itself is not really being assessed. It's the function that the SPA provides in the environment, right? So like,
Correct. It's not the data that gets assessed, it's the functions and the 800-171 requirements applied to the asset providing those functions.
right,
Or at
right.
least that's what it should be per the scoping guide. But to your point earlier, we've seen in MSP assessments, they'll even have like their full scope talks about, we have Sentinel-1 that we use for EDR support for our clients. We have Ninja RMM. We have IT Glue for credentials, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they get totally neglected. Totally neglected.
Right.
They're often like, okay, but you also have Enter ID and Intune configuration policies that you're using to implement these requirements to the laptops you're using to log into these different tools that you're using to then provide services to your customers. So let's focus on that.
I see what you're saying. That's interesting. Yeah.
That's what's happening.
And they're being straightforward and upfront about these tools that they're using for different things, but the assessor's kind of like, yeah, that's great, but let's focus on how you can.
Exactly. And
That's
I'm not trying to knock the assessors, because the things that they're assessing are important too. They're definitely in scope,
right,
because they're the devices that they're using to log in to their customer systems. They're the user accounts that they're using to log into the customer systems. So all of these things for a customer are relevant. 3.1.1 requires authorized users to be identified, and then system access be limited to only authorized users. Well, my MSP logging in from, Chicago when I'm in North Carolina remotely, they're accessing my system. So I need to know who they are. And so
right,
that's why it's important for my MSP in their security program to have an authorization process for users, an inventory of authorized users, all that jazz, just the same that they could provide me if I asked for it. Does that make sense? That's kind of how we're approaching it.
No, it totally makes sense. But as you just said, like, I can understand why an assessor overlooks it, especially given that the SIM. Yeah, I don't know.
It took a lot of thinking and talking and engaging and testing and trying out new things to come to a place where we have a pretty standardized approach to how to deal with MSPs that don't have CUI and still get them certified.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, it seems, again, I don't think they're digging in enough, but it seems like most C3POs understand the implications of MSPs getting certified, though, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it would have been really interesting, because at one point we were talking about MSPs needing to be certified before the OSAs, OSCs, and that would have been
under the proposed rule. Yeah, it was.
That would have been that would have been a nightmare, and certainly would have been interesting.
Yeah, it would have been crazy. It would have been a nightmare.
I mean, if we had a longer timeline, that might have been a good approach, but I don't know, maybe not.
That's a really good point, because I'm not trying to just keep yabbering on about this, but you bring up an excellent point that one of the complaints in the DIB, which is somewhat justified, somewhat unjustified, is that we need more time, we need more resources, all these different things, and the response is always what?
Yeah, that this has been going on since 2017.
Yeah, you've had these requirements since 2016.
Yeah.
And to your point that you just made, which I think is a really good one. I mean, I'm kind of stacking up a list of all the counters to that claim, because in a real sense, yes, the first 7012 was required since 2016. The whole reason why we're in the boat that we're in is nobody did what they said they were doing. I would argue partly because they didn't understand what they had to do.
Right. I agree.
So I want to show some empathy there. But I'm also not a big fan of that rejoinder, because of things like what you just said. Is we didn't have any notion of external service providers needing to be certified until it was first mentioned in the proposed rule for the 32 CFR, which thankfully they redacted that. That's not, or not redacted, but they removed that from the final rule. That's no longer a requirement. Even if you have CUI as an MSP, you don't have to be certified, which is risky,
but
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 also better.
but it would have been helpful in 2016 if there was some indication that an MSP might need it as well because of this contract.
Right.
Because now we would have been now MSPs would be the ones that be thinking about this as this is developing, and
Right.
honestly, the MSPs would probably have more of an understanding than the person getting the contract and be communicating to them that, hey, you're right, hey, you
That's
should really be, yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly why we are doing what we're doing. Is
right,
well, we have a product that we want MSPs to use to support the customer's compliance journey. But what we found is we have to train the MSPs to be an MSP that can support
right,
DIB contractors in order for them to adopt our tool, to actually not just purchase it, but adopt it and use it.
right,
And and that's what we discovered in that effort of trying to figure out how to increase adoption, that wait a second, like MSPs need to learn this, and they've not had to
totally,
know this until the last 2 or 3 years at max. And so, like
totally.
when people say you've had these requirements in 2016, I'm sorry, there are
It's
way
not,
more
yeah,
details than were
right,
available in 2016. Like just even since 2020, like asset categories. That wasn't. I guess technically, the common rebuttal is in the abstract of 800.171, it talks about systems storing, processing, and transmitting CUI, as well as ones that provide security protections to those systems. So, okay, I guess you could abstract, CUI assets and security protection assets kind of from that, but it was not explicit, and it
right,
was not the scoping understanding of CMMC today is not the scoping understanding that people had back in 2016 by any stretch.
totally.
PRMAs and SP. Come on.
Yeah, but thankfully CMMC, the whole program formed that clarity because of all the pushback, because of all the
Yes.
feedback, and I think that it's good. But it would have been interesting if in 2016 there was an indication that MSPs are going to need it to get it as
Yes.
well, and I think there would have been more of that back and forth that
Correct.
maybe would have gotten there quicker. So
That is a really good point, because nobody knows a company's stack and workflow, technical workflow, better than their MSP if they have one.
right,
So,
right.
no, I'm with you on that. So we've yapped on about our approach to this issue. I want to hear, from your perspective, a lot of your ideal customers that you guys work with. What do you see as their biggest holdup and struggle, and what is the strategies that you guys at Shellproof employ to help them overcome it?
I think one of the biggest struggles is getting leadership to buy in and understand that it's going to require resources and time to
Mm,
accomplish it.
same old,
And I
same
think,
old.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But the truth is, having separate meetings dedicated to communicating the implications of not dedicating these efforts to leadership is really what it comes down to, so that we do take it seriously. Um, I mean, that's it in a nutshell, to be honest.
So you guys, you're coming in, and we talked about this a little bit already, but you're coming in, and you, your strategy to help overcome apathy from leadership, or lack of understanding from leadership, is intentional, recurring, ongoing conversation. You are facilitating those
Basically,
conversations. That's awesome. Yeah.
basically,
I
yeah.
think I think every MSP, just from my perspective on our side, I mean, every MSP should incorporate some flavor of that as part of what they're providing as part of their services, is just the business enrichment, business minded cybersecurity implementation.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think even because a lot of the MSPs do like the TBRs, QBRs, even using that time to really talk about what it means to not dedicate that effort, not put the resources to this. They're ultimately going to regret it later. So,
Yeah. Well, I want to know. This is probably the biggest and most important question of the whole conversation. In my opinion.
Oh, here we go.
What are you
Oh,
what are you doing for the holidays?
oh. Well, I've been my Instagram feed has been all sorts of crazy different food recipes. So I've been inspired lately to create new things. So
Spanish
I was just
recipes?
no, not at all.
Not to woo your wife? You're not trying to woo your wife with your Spanish cooking?
No, she'll just tell me. She'll just tell me it's
It's
not the
wrong.
way she. It's wrong. Yeah, it's wrong. Basically, it's wrong. So don't do
Nice.
it. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna make banana bread, some pistachio pie thing,
Mm.
um, and that's really it. Yeah, just making a couple things, and then getting together with family, probably like most people.
Where are your
Um,
family from? Are you like close to family?
yeah, but most on Long Island. Yeah. What about you?
I am. Oh boy. So I am going to visit some family up in Pennsylvania next week. Then in December, so I'm married with 3 kids and one on the way.
Oh,
So
nice. Congrats.
we are, yes, thank you. They're a blessing. God has been so good. We are taking them and my mom and dad, um, and me, my wife, and my kids are going to Great Wolf Lodge. So we're gonna have a little bit of just for the
Oh,
weekend,
nice.
a couple days at the water slides. I took my son to Great Wolf Lodge a couple years ago, and he was just tall enough to sit in my lap on one of the slides. And I think I scarred him for life going down that slide with him. He was not a fan. However, he has bloomed into a avid roller coaster. Like he's only tall enough for the small mini coasters in like King's Dominion near where I live. But he has bloomed into an avid roller coaster lover. He even watches like POV videos of like roller
Oh, wow.
coasters. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. So, with that being said, I'm hoping that the scars from the past have been remediated, and we will be riding and riding and riding water slides the whole time. So
Awesome.
that's what we're doing for like an early Christmas thing, and then I'm taking my wife in January on a cruise with a couple from our church. Just her, the kids are staying with my parents, and before she becomes great with child and doesn't want to do anything. So
Very cool. Yeah, get that baby moon in. That's awesome.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
quick question. How old is your son?
So my oldest, his name is Ruben. He just turned 4 in September,
Oh, okay.
and then my middle, his name is Kit, and he just turned, or he's about to turn 3 in March, so a couple months. And then my youngest, well, my born youngest is a little girl. Her name is Hadassah, and she turned 1 in September as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah,
Yes.
it's my brother used to play a game called Roller Coaster Tycoon that he absolutely loved. He was
Yeah.
thinking about becoming a roller coaster architect or something. Maybe he'd like that.
Roller Coaster Tycoon. I remember that, like
Yeah, it
way back
was like
on
a
like
computer
Windows
game.
XP or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an
Yeah.
old game. Yeah.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you hopping on. I thought this was a blast. And
Same here. Thanks,
I
Steve.
know, where can you let people know how they can get in touch with you, get in touch with Shellproof, and anything that you'd like to leave people with on how they can uh, kind of seek you guys out.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is either on LinkedIn, Mark Jackolski. You could find me. Not many people have my name, or you could go to the website shellproofsecurity.com. And yeah, we're here to support and build this thing, and keep this train moving. So
All
thanks,
right,
Steve.
Mark. Thank you so much. Happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. And just for everybody's awareness, we are planning on doing a webinar with Mark, a more uh, focused webinar on a specific topic where we'll be talking about here soon. So look out for the marketing for the registration for that. So thanks, Mark. I appreciate you, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. And same to you in the holidays and everything. Troy.